Hello everybody, welcome back to the table. Today we have an eBay find, and this right here is a Kershaw Starkey Ridge. And so this knife was one of their first liner locking folders. So this one premiered back in the 90s at some point, and this one has lived a pretty rough life. So we can see this version of the knife has G10 scales. It has an ATS 34 blade. But really, most importantly, as you can tell, it's led a long life, and I found this one on eBay for a somewhat low price, so I decided to pick it up and see if there was anything I could do with it. And so, coming right out of the package, and of course I saw the photos prior to buying it, so I knew it would be a hard case, but you can see the blade here. The blade's actually not in terrible shape. There is some surface rust on there, as you can see, especially around the thumb stud. But on the reverse side, we can see the model number. This is the 1415 ST. So the ST, of course, is because this is a serrated blade. It is a liner locking folder. And as you can see, the centering's not great. There's a lot of play in the blade. And it is tightened down as far as it can go. So I'm going to really see what I can do to this knife to work it over. And I don't think I'm going to be able to fully restore it for a few different reasons. But I think it's worth taking a second look at. So really cool to see. I mean, even looking at the pocket clip there, I mean, you can see the clip snapped right off at some point in time. But the G10 is battered. When you look at the handle, it's missing two of the screws that hold the handle together entirely. So there's not a whole lot left on this knife. The blade is super dull. It's a really rough condition knife. So I'm going to take it apart and try and see what I can do to help this knife. And I'm probably going to have to rebuild part of it, or at least replace a lot of the original parts. Like these handle screws, for instance, they thread directly into the G10 scale on the reverse side. And if you know about G10, of course, it's really not designed to take that kind of threading and hold it forever. So, of course, after 20 plus years, the other two screws just fell out, and we had one left barely hanging on. So we're going to have to fix that. The plastic back spacer just falls right out. These three pocket clip screws, they are Phillips head, which of course is kind of interesting on a folding knife, but they also only thread into the G10 scale. So luckily, while this one here is broken, obviously, I was luckily able to find a replacement pocket clip from this same exact model. So we're going to get to see a brand new pocket clip on this knife, probably for the first time in many years. So stay tuned for the end of the video for that. But just taking this knife apart, it came apart pretty easily because, of course, everything was very loose. The pivot screw was reversed, so this hasn't been taken apart before because the show side of the screw was on the lock side and vice versa, if that makes any sense. But taking the knife apart, we can see the liners. The steel liners do have some surface rust on there. The blade itself does have a lot of surface rust around the pivot area. And both sides of the knife use these nylon washers. And so we'll try and clean those up a bit. The stop pin is in good condition. Overall, all the hardware that survived was in fairly workable condition, but I think we're going to have to replace quite a bit of it to get this knife working again. So there's the other nylon washer. And of course, just taking this knife apart, again, pieces came apart fairly simple. A lot of rust, just rust dust, I guess is the word for it. I don't know. You can see it just kind of wipes off for the most part. But we're going to give all these parts a nice little bath. And all I'm using is just your basic dollar store white vinegar. And this is fairly good at removing some surface rust. And I will say, I'm recording this after the fact. I did make some mistakes here, and you're going to see those in a bit. Number one is I soaked these items in the vinegar for too long. And honestly, everything was fine except for the blade. And we'll kind of see the results of that later on. But the vinegar is fairly good at cleaning off the parts of the rust. So I just threw everything into the tub except for that broken pocket clip. And it literally sat for about a week. And that's my fault. I just got to other projects and left it. So you can see that vinegar has turned literally red in color. And so I have some more dollar store wire brushes, and I'm going to use just to scrub off some of that surface rust. And it's fairly effective at doing so. I like this set. Again, this is from Dollar Tree, and now it's a $1.25 tree, but you understand these are fairly inexpensive brushes. They come in a 3-pack, and they're great for things like this where it's kind of a disposable purpose. You could always get, cheap toothbrushes from there as well. serve the same purpose. So I'm going to start with this plastic bristled brush, you know, and just do my best to wipe it off. And off camera, I did take this under the sink and rinse it with soap and water several times as well. I just didn't show that on camera. But everything cleaned up fairly nicely, you know, so the G10 scales, most of the rust just came right off with soap and water, and the scrubbing just helped clean them up a bit. They were very like grayish and dry looking afterwards, so I did put a little dab of oil on each scale just to kind of moisten them up, I guess. I don't know, to make them shiny again. What's kind of neat is right as I took the liner out of the vinegar, the detent ball fell right out of the liner lock. Like it literally just fell through, and that detent ball is absolutely microscopic. And so it falls right through the hole, and I did some trickery with super glue to get it affixed back in there. Not sure how long that of a fix that's going to be, but it is what it is. You know, a week in vinegar kind of did its job on there. So again, mistakes were made. But again, both liners cleaned up very nicely. Most of the surface rust is completely gone, and they just under soap and water especially, they just came right back to life. So both the liners looking very nice. The blade, you can see, you know, once I pulled it out of the vinegar, it kind of formed this grayish patina finish on there. And my mistake too is not removing the thumb stud, as you can see, before the soak. So we have this little ring around there. So what I'm really going to do with the blade is just run some polishing compound over it. So I'm using some Mother's Mag aluminum polish. And again, did that all off camera. That was with a Dremel, and it was kind of messy, kind of gross to watch. But you can see just that grayish finish. And, you know, if I'd gotten it even, it might have been a kind of a neat, you know, do-it-yourself finish on the blade. But I did not soak the knife evenly, so I did polish that out to kind of get rid of most of that ugliness. But either way, the blade did come back to life, no problem. All the little pieces cleaned up perfectly fine. This one surviving body screw did clean up pretty well also, because that was absolutely, you know, covered in rust. And you can see just the black coating coming right off. But take a closer look, and you can see just all that surface rust fell right off. I ended up not using this screw because, of course, I had to buy some new parts for this knife. So I went to, I think it was usa.knifemaker.com. I purchased some standoffs to replace the backspacer. I bought some new washers. I purchased some new screws because since the knife was threaded through the G10 scales, I decided I wanted screws coming from both sides of the handle to connect through the new standoffs. And it was all just a gamble. I had no idea if this was going to work. I had no idea if the blade would hit the standoffs. So I really kind of lucked out. I'm installing those standoffs right now. Sorry, it's not a better angle. And, you know, this was really kind of spur of the moment type stuff. But it actually did come together quite nicely. I was actually fairly impressed at how easy it was to adjust this knife and modify it for standoffs as opposed to the original backspacer. The copper or the bronze washers that I ordered were not the exact size. I couldn't find the exact dimensions available. So I did end up using the original scales plus one bronze washer to help with centering and lockup. But just putting it right back together, the knife came back together with no problem. You know, tightened right up. So we can see right here, G10 scales are a little bit cleaner. We can see there are screws now on both sides of the body of the knife. Lockup is fine. You can see the washers in there. We have that brand new pocket clip installed, which just fit on just right. And the standoffs there replace the backspacers. That's probably kind of the biggest tell that this knife was brought back to life. Overall finish on the knife came out okay. I could have probably done a few more passes of polishing on it, but I was getting covered in compound. Looking at the blade, you can see some slight pitting, and again, that's probably my fault from too much of the vinegar bath. But centering came out fairly nice. Lockup is good. It's nice and tight now. You can see the pocket clip, how it fits in pocket. Works perfectly fine. Has good tension. The new clips, the new hardware, nice and blacked out, so it's all matching. Really nice. It's kind of this front flipper design. That little bump can be used to front flip the knife. I try not to treat this one too rough now because I know that detent ball could potentially pop out anytime. but we're just going to sharpen it up. And so if I haven't mentioned it already in my other videos, the Work Sharp Precision Adjust, that thing is a godsend for sharpening. I've used so many systems over the years, some of them good, some of them not so good, but this one is just dead nuts, stupid easy to use. It's not great at sharpening serrations, but then again, I have yet to run into a system that is really consistent with serrations. So for this knife, the serrations I was able to get, somewhat usable. They're not razor sharp, but they'll rip through cardboard. They'll cut through cardboard if needed. But the plain edge part of the blade came out perfectly usable and sharp. Very nicely done. And so again, what's funny about this whole project is, of course, that I spent more on parts, getting this knife back up and running, than I did actually, on the knife itself. But I guess there's that quote that it's not about the destination, it's about the journey, and so I think that applies here for sure. But I love bringing knives like this back to life because, as you saw, it was trashed. It was very well used and well loved over the many years of its use. And now it is a perfectly serviceable, usable knife. Would I throw this one through the ringer again? Probably not. It's lived its 9 lives, but it definitely is a sharp knife. Hope you all enjoyed watching this, guys. See you later, and bye-bye.